So we need two factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 1. So what are our factors going to be? Negative 3 and 2. Perfect. So what do we do with that? So we need our parentheses. What goes in the first parentheses? X minus 3 and x plus 2. So we're just taking this number and putting it into our spot in the parentheses there. And we're taking this one and putting it there. And that's it. And since the 2 is positive, we put a plus sign in the middle of that parentheses. So we just have x minus 3 times x plus 2 when Sophia comes back. So let's look at number 4. So what do we do first? That add up to what? Negative 3. So we need factors of negative 54 that add up to negative 3. So what are our factors going to be? Negative 9 and 6. Perfect. So what do we do with that? Perfect. So we're just... No. Since we have two sets of parentheses here, we don't put the little squared on top. So then negative 9 just goes there, and the 6 just goes right there. And then we just have, since the problem has m's in it, we just have our answer with m's instead of x's.
Would it be wrong to flip if it was 6 or m plus 6?
Good question. No, the same thing would be right if we put m plus 6 and m minus 9. So these are the same thing. And if we FOIL these back out, we would get our original equation. So these two are the same exact thing. So let's look at number 5. What do we do first now that we have a negative out in front? We pull out the negative 1 and we change the sign of everything on the inside. So we have k squared first. What do we have next? Minus 6k and then minus 7. And now we're going to factor the same way we did before, but we just keep this negative 1 out front. So what do we need two factors of?
1 and negative 7.
We need two factors of negative 7. So 1 and negative 7. That gives us negative 6. Perfect. So we keep our negative 1 out front, and now we just do our two parentheses. So what goes in our parentheses?
K plus 1, K minus 7.
So we have negative 1 times k plus 1 times k minus 7. Perfect. Ready for the next one? We got to do the same thing.
Only when it's negative?
Only when it's negative. So we're taking out a negative 1, and what's going to go inside our parentheses?
X squared minus 3x minus 20.
Right, so we just change the sign of everything. So now we need two factors of negative 28. That gives us negative 3.
7 and 4. But they both. One is negative, so negative 7.
Negative 7. Perfect. So now what do we do?
X minus 7. X plus 4.
What did I forget?
The 1.
The negative 1 out front. Can't forget about that negative 1. Alright, so these are all part 1. So all we need to do is find the two factors of the last number that add up to the middle number and just put those inside our two parentheses. Ready for part 2? Okay, so we did number 7 in class. So let's do number 8. Now we're factoring using the greatest common factors. So we have a number and or x's that are in common in all these 3 things. So we need to pull what's in common out. So what's the number that we have in common in all of these? 5. Do we have x's in common in all 3? No, because this one does not have any x's. So we can't take out any x's. So now we're going to divide 5 by all of these numbers here. So what do we get? What do we have left? X squared
minus 4x
minus 4x
minus 5.
minus 5. Perfect. And now since we have a trinomial in our parentheses, we need a factor just like we did in part 1. So we need 2 factors of negative 5 that give us negative 4. Negative 5 and 1. So we have 5, and then in parentheses,
Can I go to the bathroom?
when she comes back. What goes in our parentheses? X minus 5 and x plus 1.
Yeah, all of them? With the 5.
Yes. For this part 2 with the greatest common factors, we need to pull out our greatest common factor. So we pulled out the 5. And just like we did with the negative 1, the 5 just stays along and we just attach it at the end.
Okay.
Ready for number 9? Can you see it? Yeah. So what number can we pull out of these 2? 3. And how many p's can we take out? 3. So we're going to take out our smallest amount of p's that we have. So since this one has 4 and this one has 3, we can only take out 3 p's. So we're taking out a p cubed. So now we're going to divide this by 3 and divide this number by 3. So what's our first going to be? Just p. So with the p's, since we have 4 and we're taking away 3, we subtract. So 4 minus 3 would be just 1. So that we have 1 p left. And then what do we get for our next? So we have minus 5.
That's all.
Just that. Because we have 3 p's and we took out 3 p's, so now we have no p's left. And since we only have a binomial in our parentheses, we can't factor this anymore. So this right here is our answer. If we were to distribute our 3p cubed back out into what's in the parentheses, we will get the same thing as our original equation. So if we have 3p cubed times p, what would that be? 3p to the 4th. And then 3p cubed times negative 5 would be negative 15p cubed. So that's the same exact thing that we had in our original equation. So if we wanted to on the test, we can multiply it all back out and we would get the same thing we started with. So that's a good way to check your work at the end if you have time. Ready for the next one? So what number can we take out here? 6. And how many b's can we take out? 2. Because 2 is our smallest amount of b's here at the end. So now we're going to divide all the numbers by 6. And we subtract the b's. So what do we get first? B. How many b's? We have 4, but we took away 2. So 2 b's. What do we have next? Plus 6b. So just 1. And then what's last? Minus 7. And we had 2 b's to start, but we took 2 b's away, so this minus 7 has no b's. So now since we have a trinomial on our inside of our parentheses, we need to factor it again. So we need 2 factors of negative 7 that add up to 6. So 1 and 7. What's 1 plus 7? 8. So it has to be negative 1. because 7 minus 1 is 6, which is what we're looking for. So now we keep our 6b squared on the outside. And what do we do next? What is it? B minus 1 times b plus 7. Any questions on this one? Ready for the next? Okay, let's look at number 11. What do we do first?
Factor for 3.
We can take out a 3.
Oh, yeah.
Can we take out any k's?
Yeah.
No.
No,
Why not?
because this one has no k's, so we can't take out any k's. So what are we left with now?
Left with k squared minus 3k minus 4.
Now what do we do?
I have to find what could go into that. So for negative 4 and 1.
So we're going to have negative 4 and 1. What do we do next?
Now you have this 2 sides, so k minus 4 and k plus 1.
Is that our answer?
No, with 3.
With the 3 in front. Can't forget about that 3 that we pulled out in the beginning. Okay, and we have one more with our greatest common factor like these. Ready for the last one? So what do we do first here? Take out a 6. What do we do next?
X squared plus 3x plus 2.
X squared plus 3x plus 2. Perfect. So we divided all of these numbers by 6. So now what do we do?
The factors, 2 is 123. So 1 and 2. So then 6 in parentheses x plus 1 and then out of parentheses x plus 2.
Perfect. Okay, so this was part 2 with the greatest common factors. So in this one, we pull it out, and if it's still a trinomial, then we have to factor it again, just like part 1. Okay. But if it's just a binomial, then we just leave that as our answer. Any questions on these? All right, let's go on to part 3. So we factor when a is not 1. So meaning that this number out front is not 1, and we can't pull out any greatest common factors. So what do we do now? We multiply the first and the last one together. So we get 630. So now we need 2 factors of 630 that add up to what? 59, our number in the middle. So what are our factors going to be here? 45 and 14. So now what do we do with that? Now what do we do?
Divide by 59.
We divide by 10. We divide by our first number out here. So we divide this by 10 and we divide this by 10. And now we need to simplify these as much as possible. And then if we still have a fraction, that's when we bring the denominator out front. So how do we simplify 14 over 10? We can divide each by 2, so we're left with 7 over 5. Now in our second one, how can we simplify 45 over 10? By 5. So 45 divided by 5 would be 9 over 2. Perfect. So now since we still have numbers on the bottom that can't be simplified anymore, we bring them to the front of our x. So we're going to have parentheses 5x plus 7 times 2x plus 9. Bless you. Okay, let's go to our next example. 15. What do we do first here?
Multiply
4 times negative 30, and what do we get? Negative 120. So what are two factors of negative 120 that give us 37? 40 and negative 3. So now what do we do? Our parentheses. X plus 40 and x minus 3. Perfect. Now what? We divide by 4, so we're dividing by this number out in the front. Can we simplify the first one? Yep. How many times does 4 go into 40? 10. And it goes in evenly, so we get x minus 10. Can we simplify 3 over 4? No. So we're going to move the 4 out in front of the x, so we have 4x minus 3. So this is our answer. Ready for the next one? Okay, let's go to 16. What do we do first? 4 times 6. 4 times negative 6. What do we get? Negative 24. What are two factors of negative 24 that give us negative 5?
8, -8, and 3.
Negative 8 and 3. So now what do we do?
Now you pull it down, so it would be -8, and you plus 3. So 5 by 4
Now we divide by 4. Can we simplify the first one?
would be -2.
Can we simplify the next one?
4v plus 3.
So we bring the 4 out front, and we get 4v plus 3. That's our answer. Ready for the next one? Okay, 17. What do we do first? Multiply the two outsides. So what do we get?
8,
So we need two factors of 8 that give us negative 9. 8 and 1. 8 plus 1 is 9.
both of them are negative.
Both of them are negative. So now what do we do?
Now you pull it down. Would be -8. B minus 1. So 5 by 4. B minus 2. 4b plus minus 1.
Perfect. Okay, last one in this section. What do we do first? 90 times 6, and what do we get? 540. What are two factors of 540 that give us 47? 20 and 27. I promise on the test the numbers will not be this big. So what do we put in our parentheses?
N plus 20
N plus 20
over 6.
over 6 and
N plus, 6N. Just N plus 27 over 6.
perfect. So can we simplify the first one?
Wait, what?
Yes.
So what goes into 20 and 6? 2. So we get 10 over 3. And then what about the second one?
Oh, yes, 3.
3. 3 goes into both of them. So we have 9 over 2. So we have to simplify it as much as possible before we bring the denominator up to the front. Because if we brought the 6 up to the front right off the bat, our answer would be wrong. If we FOILed it back out, we wouldn't get our original answer. So we need to simplify it as much as possible before we bring the denominator up to the front. So now we have, now, 2n plus 9. Perfect. So any questions on factoring when a is not 1? Nope. So these were just factoring, but you gotta multiply the first and the last ones together before we start factoring. Ready for the next section? Yes? Okay, number 19. So now we're factoring each completely using the perfect squares. So what do? We need to find a and b. A equals v, and what does b equal? 5. So what do we do with that? V minus 5 squared. So remember, when we're factoring using perfect squares, we're just going to have one parenthesis squared.
Where'd you get the 5 from?
Okay, so we got the v and we got the 5 by taking the square root of the first one and the square root of the last one.
Please dismiss the staff.
So then b minus 5 squared would be our answer.
Because we just do a minus b squared. When this is a minus, we have a minus here, but if they were both plus, we'd have a plus in our answer.
Where'd they get the 10 from?
The 10 was just in our original answer.
So the 10's irrelevant?
Yeah.
Alright.
Okay, so now to find our a and b, we need to take the square root of the first and the square root of the last. So what do we get for a? And what do we get for b? So what's our answer?
2 squared.
So we have m plus 2 squared. And the reason why we have a plus sign is because we have 2 plus signs in our original equation. Ready for the next? So we take the square root of the first and last. So what do we get for a? 3 what? 3n. What do we get for b? 2. So now what's our answer going to be? 3n plus 2 squared. Now 22. What do we do? Right. So any questions on these with the perfect squares? So remember, perfect squares are just one parentheses squared. And for our next section, factoring using the difference of two squares, it's going to be 2 parentheses. So remember, when you see this 2, we're doing 2 parentheses. So now we take the square root of our first and the square root of our last. So what's our A? 9 what?
M.
And what's our B?
Negative
5.
five.
Because it's always going to be
Middle.
positive, because this here, in all of these examples, we have a minus sign in the middle. So it's always going to be A plus B and A minus B. So what goes in our parentheses?
9M plus 9M minus 5.
So we just do our A plus our B and our A minus our B. Ready for 25? So what's our A?
X.
And what's our B? So what's our answer going to be?
X plus 10,
X plus 10
X minus 10.
and X minus 10.
We don't need the squared.
No, the only one that gets squared is the perfect squares. So for this one, we're not putting the squared on it, it's just going to be 2 parentheses. So when you see this 2, just think 2 parentheses. So let's look at 26. What's our A?
5.
5 what?
A. And B is 3.
And our B is 3. So what's our answer going to be?
5A plus 3, 5A minus 3.
5A plus 3 and 5A minus 3.